Very good, and thanks for all this, Doug. It's great, great you set this out.
You bet. You bet. Well, this is really exciting. So let's talk about the book in a really superficial way. I was telling Alan it looks like a Sync Book Press title. Um, can you describe the cover and the artwork and the concept behind that a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. Actually, I just talked to the artist last night, so I have some more idea what it's about. So the artist is Kaylee Pickenpaw, um, and she has been involved in sync stuff for quite a while before. She's not really now at all, but um, so the big thing about this book is that we started this whole thing 4 years ago, I think it was, and so I think that's when she made the cover as well. But yeah, the cover is beautiful. It's like one of like it's excellent, I think, and it's just like to me, it's just charged with meaning. Um, it's just I can get lost just looking at the cover, and then so I don't know how to describe it artistically, really. Uh,
Do
it's
you
just
think she's drawing off different themes that you're presenting in the book, or is it just there? There is like this mythic charge to the different nodes in the image.
yeah, she is. Yeah, I talked to her about that, and she is drawing off of different things that she came across in the text or in the blog. So it's I don't know how many different individual images there are. Could be like 14 or something like that, or maybe more, 14 or 16. Um, and these individual images actually appear within the book as well, periodically through the book. I guess in places where the text sort of inspired the image or something, or there's some resonance there. So they appear out all the way through the book, which is great. It sort of breaks up the text too, and they're the main images in the book. There's some other ones that Alan included, I think, from just public domain sources, but really great ones too. Um, but to me, the whole thing looks like a new zodiac or something. There's it's amazing. It looks like everything's spiraling into a sort of like a rose hole or something. Like not a black hole, but something different. Um, so it's and there's things on here that were not even intended by her, but just it they work completely with the contents of the book. Like the it's sort of a wraparound cover, so it's one image, one piece, the entire thing, one artistic piece from front cover to back cover. So the center figure in the front cover, well, there's a sun in the top corner, and the central figure is Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing, carrying a woman. And then the central figure, kind of in the back, is Pan with the moon. So we have Thoth and Pan. Um, it's interesting, like Thoth or Thoth is also Hermes, the kind of Egyptian version of Hermes, and Pan is actually the son of Hermes. So it kind of works that way. But
Oh
there's all
yeah.
kinds of things like that in both the art and actually in Alan's sort of, I don't know what to call it, like layout of the text. He's included a lot of different font aspects and different sizes of the lettering and different emphasis that was never really in my original text, but it just works as a kind of subtext or something, or another overlay onto the text, which makes it really interesting for me. It's like both the art and then his layout. create another story for me almost. So I'm really happy about how it turned out.
Yeah, it is. The whole thing is really beautiful. And so even if you're just as an object, like if you flip through it, it is really kind of inviting, just because it's not the text is, and it's interesting because in the book club we've done a bunch of books that have playful typography, and this definitely falls into that category as far as that goes. Well, so this is a collection from your blog, group name for Grape Juice, over the period of like 2012 to 2015. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's those first 4 years of my blog, which I put out a lot of stuff in those first 4 years. Like there's a lot of stuff. Like later on, there's a bunch of I put out less stuff, but the pieces were longer. So I don't know how it balances out the early stuff and the later stuff. But yeah, this is all the not all, but a bunch of earlier essays that I selected that kind of I thought fit together, and it turns out they fit together a lot better than even I expected they would in this book. So that was a happy moment to realize that. Um, but yeah, so there's a
Did
lot.
you collect these chronologically, or is there some other structure to the book that made sense? That was my curiosity. If this is a linear construction that becomes a circle, or if you're telling a story differently than that.
Yeah, it's basically chronological. I'm interested in that you said it makes a circle, but did you find it did?
Well,
This is surprising news too.
no, when I've talked to both you and Alan, like that was my first question is, does it make sense as a book?
Hmm.
And you both are like, yeah, I think it really does. But even though books are linear, I think it's in my head still from our book club. We're reading so many circles where once you finish the book, you turn around. It just you keep going. Because you get more and more upon further revolutions.
Yeah, it does. I guess when I selected them first, there's a commonality of theme, but there has been all the way through my blog, anyways. I feel like I'm just sort of telling one tale or trying to trace the outline of one giant beast, you know. So this it does work like that, like sort of thematically, they all connect up to each other. There's certain points in the book that we found when we were doing our proofreading that I missed that refer to other things in my blog that aren't mentioned in this book, but we just left them in there just to make it more, more work for the reader or whatever. Yeah. Um, but most things do fit up with each other. They do sort of mesh with each other.
And so then, why did you stop at 2015 and not include some of those other longer ones? Or was this where, you said this is a 4-year project now, so then you must have started about 2016 with this idea?
Yeah, so it's just because that's it just got bogged down. Like the whole process of publishing this thing got bogged down. Like people had their own. Um, it was basically Alan, me, Jason, Kaylee who were involved, and we all had things in our lives that just stopped the process for a long time. And there's kind of a while, like a kind of a long while, where I doubted if this would ever happen, you know. And it was just probably over this last period in 2020 when we all had more time just because of the coronavirus pandemic, that we could finally put put this together. But I don't know if it would have happened outside of that, actually. So that's a good thing to think about as well. So because of that, we started the process in 2016, and then we finished a bunch of the process earlier on, and then even though maybe I would have wanted to add other things, I couldn't do it at that point. It would be adding too much more stuff right from the beginning to deal with, you know. So it just kept on with what we had already decided on, which is fine. Like, sorry, at some point maybe put out something else or no, something more recent. But it's kind of good like this as a sort of introduction, and I think it really covers all the bases, anyways, you know.
And so, what were you doing down there? What is it that had you enthralled for those 3 years? You know, what is it? So like you emphasize poetry in the introduction. Are you able to? So like that's the interesting thing with like synchromystics and people who are interested in artistic things and they're chasing different things, that they end up discovering they have kind of a through line in all their work that connects it all. You know, are you able to articulate, you know, what it is that fascinates you?
Yeah, I think like right from the beginning of my blog, if I was thinking about it, it basically started out as probably like quite a few people, like it started out as a series of internet email exchanges with different people, and then I realized that why am I doing this? Why not just put out a blog and then put it just make it available for anybody? So I think that's how it started, and basically it's just an exploration of the kind of dreamlike nature of our reality, including things like synchronicity, of course. Like I think synchronicity is sort of a starting point for a lot of this, you know, like because it's something that happens to everybody, and it's something that is startling enough if you pay attention to it that it does make you think that you can go deeper with it, and it will lead to other things, even bigger things. So I know you've gone through that process too, where one synchronicity leads to another, and then you just accumulate symbols that you've had in your synchronicities, and then those symbols resonate with other symbols that come up later in other synchronicities or dreams, or like a lot of people were dealing with popular culture, which I'm not as much into at all, but I am into books and literature and philosophy, and so that's where I saw these things tie into. But I don't want to make a case of like highbrow, lowbrow, you know, because I try to break down that distinction too in the book or in my blog in general. Just it doesn't really matter where it's coming from. It just happens for me. That's what I'm interested in. So that's sort of the starting point for me to explore these things. But yeah, once you get deeper and deeper into this, you start to realize, you start to build up your own symbolic system, and that's what we find in these in poets and other writers and artists in general, where they do create this symbolic system in which all these different symbols sort of resonate with each other, and then you can make translations from their system into the systems of other poets and of other writers who have probably been influenced by each other or influenced by a common source or something. And so for me, it's just fun to tie all that together. That's basically what I'm doing. I'm just playing around with these things, and in doing so, trying to make my own world more interesting. Like trying to imbue it with more meaning is the big thing. Um, so the synchronicity, of course, is like meaningful coincidences, and yet coincidences are constant. Like anything that happens is a coincidence. So the key word in that, in Jung's formulation of that, is meaningful coincidences. It's what gives these coincidences meaning, and this idea of making your life more meaningful, even more mythic, and then tying it into this whole tradition of mythology and literature and art and everything else is kind of the point I'm making in the blog and in the book.
So something, you're reminding me of all my own like early blogging and discovery phase. But I'm wondering, as you were, you were creating a symbolic vocabulary for yourself, did you ever have the experience where, even though it was your own personal journey and you were discovering things, that some of the symbols that you felt signified were verified by other people's journeys?
Oh, sure. Like that's what led me to that whole sync community, if you want to call it that. It's just, yeah, checking it out on the internet and finding other people, who are into the same things as I am. Like especially what drew me into it was um, I got really, really into Finnegan's Wake, and I had my own take on Finnegan's Wake as this kind of prophetic book, almost like speaking to our times uniquely. Um, and then I stumbled across Always Record, I think at the same, like 2013, when I already put up my blog, and then I could hear Bill Klaus's rants on Finnegan's Wake, and he's got the exact same experience and spirit about it as I do, and I was like, wow, this guy knows. so I tried to connect with him, and then he connected with me, and that's sort of what tied me into this greater community of people. But then, yeah, for sure, a lot of, yeah, the commonality of things that people are interested in is there's a huge overlap, and so I try to mention a lot of that in my book too, especially because it's earlier blog posts. I was more into that, more looking into what other people are doing. Later on, I get more and more just into books in general. Um, but this is probably, these earlier essays are probably more open in that way.
So, I mean, so the interesting journey that happened for me as I was out exploring, and then some of the discoveries I made, I realized that Alan Moore had also like used the same things in his fiction that I had never. So it's like, even though my journey was unique to me, like I could have just read his fiction and gotten all the same stuff, but it wouldn't have been my journey. So it was like I that was kind of it this play space is interesting in that. But one of the things that I later had problems with is, so when we're blogging, I often would say things with a level of authority. It's strange to say things aloud because it's like you're saying, you're discovering this is how something is, but at the same time, because you're writing it down, this is how something is, and it seems like you're the authority on the subject. Do you ever, and you don't have any problem with that, do you, as far as like making a statement about the nature of things?
Yeah, well, yeah, the thing is like we definitely live in a culture of experts, right? Where we're not, I don't want to say we're not permitted, but we're not encouraged to make um, definitive statements or opinions about things that we're not an expert in. But
Right.
with blogs and stuff, they, yeah, like you said, it's like everybody has their opinion and everybody puts out whatever they want. And I think that's fine, actually. It's I obviously I'm not an expert in these things. I'm just somebody poking my nose into a whole bunch of different fields and trying to make connections. But I am an expert in my own discovery of these things. So in that, I'm an authority. I'm the only authority. So I think that's fine to do. It just if you have that in mind, if the author has that in mind, and hopefully the readers have that in mind as well. Um, so yeah, it's more just playful discovery, like just exploring the wonder of it all is the main thing, and to encourage people to do that on their own too. They come up with their own journey to look at. So when I'm talking about Joyce or whatever, I'm not an expert I'm not an expert Finnegan's Wakist or anything like that. But I have got deeply, deeply into it. So I do think I have some insights on it that are valuable, at least to me. And I think to a lot of people, like it's more maybe an emotional take on it, or like I said, a prophetic take on it. And I strive to do something that Ezra Pound encouraged all the time, is to make it new. When you read any text, and especially he's talking about older texts, um, to make them new. That doesn't mean that you dress them up in modern terminology or modern style or anything like that, but make it new in the sense of you try your very best to find the essence of meaning that these books contain, and then make that shine again. Um, so that's what I'm trying to do. I don't. It's not a matter of trying to be an expert at that. It's just trying to kind of shake away or wash away the dross and muck on these shiny golden nuggets, right? And let them be discovered again. Let them glitter again.
So you definitely have a high regard for words in general, but the highest regard for poetry. Like, what is that difference between poetry and just a good narrative that's well written?
Yeah, it's another thing that Pound talked about is and like bring a Pound, like he's kind of a controversial person too. Like he became a fascist for the bulk of his later career. Like he may have renounced it afterwards, right? So he's an interesting figure, especially in regard to like books like The Tunnel. Um, but he's also a brilliant poet and a brilliant writer on poetics. And his take on poetry is that poetry is language um, maximally condensed with meaning. So if the whole point is meaning, is to create meaning again in the world, then poetry does that the best, because it's so hyper dense. It's like each word means so much and has so much intention involved behind it. Like I have this thing that behind every word is a god. And that comes out, like if you look into um, the etymology of most words, that's literally true. That you can trace things back, and you can find a god of some sort behind a lot of words. And poetry brings that out. good poetry. That's the point of poetry is it should hit you as a divine force almost. Um, so that's why I have the highest respect for poets. I don't call myself a poet. You know, it's like such a huge thing. I would love to be, you know, but it's a to me these are the closest beings to the gods, and like William Blake said, may have even created the gods at the beginning. Like not in the sense that the gods are just imaginative things, you know, but that the gods are real and the poets created them, you know.
I actually read a book about that where uh, the god is whatever the culture is focused at, and the poet is what focuses the culture. So like Aeschylus, creating the gods in the play itself is what creates, like, imbues the god with life because the culture is attuned. That was a pretty interesting book, but
Yeah,
it's this whole conversation is amazing in light of all of the depth that we got into with the tunnel, and that guy's idea of the difference between history and poetry
yeah,
as
yeah, yeah,
well, where
yeah.
poetry is eternal. It is, it's not the past or the future. It is always right now,
And
the
it's
truth.
and it's particular. It's not general. So that's another big point about poetry is that um, unlike history and unlike science, it's not trying to find the general laws of things. It's the whole point of it is to explore a particularized singular space, which is your own perception in your own consciousness. Um, and it's different for every person, but of course, um, the very the very fact that we're able to communicate means that there's a lot of overlap as well. You know, there's a lot of things when we read poetry, um, the words resonate to us as well because we experience the same feelings and emotions and perceptions as poets from thousands of years ago. You can like you read Homer, or at least you read translations of Homer if you can't read the Greek, which I can't, but you read translations of Homer, and it still rings out. You know, it still rings. You're there. You know, it has so much power even over millennia. You know, and that's something that history and science and these things that concentrate on finding general laws can't do, you know. Um, so I think
So
it's
when I first started blogging, I definitely had my head in Moby Dick, and it was the lens through which I looked at that moment in time. And it went on for a period of time where uh, that book just made so much sense for a number of years for me. And I know that I could pick it up again and enjoy it again. I'm wondering what your relationship to the Wake is now, whether or not it is something that is continually renewing, or is it something, what is your relationship with it now?
oh, it's still very much there all the time. Like it's hardly a day goes by where I don't actually pick it up and flip through it or something. And this year I want to come back again and reread the whole thing again for the next time. And so every time I learn more about it and I find more and more sources behind it, and so my experience in reading it is even more enriching, you know. So it's constantly there. Like the great books in literature, that's what they're like. Like Moby Dick's a great example as well. Like that's a huge one for me. But what I found, this is the thing, I think I talk about this in the book too, is that the Wake opens up, or at least for me, opened up every other book. So it's easy to see when you read The Wake that this is a mystery that needs to be unraveled, and you can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it. But because it has so many references and so many sort of arrows or lines of flight going out to and making connections to other texts, it's like then you go back to these other books, these other great works of literature, and it's the same thing. You can go deeper and deeper and deeper into them. So it kind of it turns Finnegan's Wake turns every other book into Finnegan's Wake, which is
So something that you invoke at the beginning is you talk about Joseph Campbell in myth, and he is such a strange character in the sense that his overlap is really interesting with a lot of interesting literature, where I think he cut his teeth on Joyce. And so, did you read his Skeleton Key to Finnegan's Wake?
oh yeah, for sure. That's a deeply important book, because I think it's the first full-length book of trying to go through the entire Wake and make some sense of it. You know, before that, there's a collection of essays of different writers, including Samuel Beckett, who Joyce kind of assembled in a way to make just different essays about different aspects of Finnegan's Wake. But it was Campbell, and I think it's what is it, Henry Morton, who came up with Henry Morton Robinson, who came up with a skeleton key to Finnegan's Wake. And I think this was just going to check it. I think this was only came out in 1944. So it's very early. Like Finnegan's Wake was 1939. This one came out in 44. It's like they did an amazing job trying to figure it out at that point, you know. But it still goes on. Like the academic study of Finnegan's Wake is massive now still. But it's almost as if Joyce started it from the beginning, and with this collection of essays that he put out with Samuel Beckett, and then everything that's happened since, it's kind of it's almost like he intended it, you know. It's like he started out, he created Finnegan's Wake, and then he created Finnegan's Wake Studies, you know. And in a way, Finnegan's Wake Studies is just another part of Finnegan's Wake. So when you're reading Finnegan's Wake, it's a much bigger book than the actual 628 pages of that particular book. But yeah, and so what I'm saying is like, yeah, if you use the Wake as your sort of starting point, which I did in my blog in a way, it just goes off in every different direction and includes more and more and more. And that's basically what this book is about. It's kind of the extensions of Finnegan's Wake in a sense.
And so where has Finnegan's Wake extensions and studies led you to beyond the book?
Well,
what
especially
are you working on these days?
Yeah, especially the older traditions, like with the sources of Joyce. So yeah, if you get deeper into that, you start to realize that although Finnegan's Wake is completely unique, an amazing work, you know, it does follow this tradition, for lack of a better term, that just goes back further and further and further. Like his immediate predecessors are people like Yeats, and I've done big studies on Yeats, especially Yeats as a vision. And then before Yeats, a huge influence on both Yeats and Joyce is William Blake. And then William Blake, so the title of this book comes from The Four Zoas by William Blake. And then if you explore his stuff, like exploring Blake's prophetic epics, that's a life journey in itself, you know. But then you can go further back from Blake, you know, into eventually back to the Renaissance and people like Giordano Bruno, and then the Hermetic sources that sort of sparked off the Renaissance, to Hermeticism, and then trace it back to like Neoplatonic philosophy, and then Platonic philosophy, and then back to Egypt, and then further back, So yeah, it's sort of an endless quest.
Well, you mentioned the title. Your title came from a Blake. Death Sweat of the Cluster. What is that about?
What is the Blake poem about? It's
Is that where the title comes from?
Yeah, so it's in his book The Four Zoas, and I think it's the ninth night of the Four Zoas. Like, I'm not going to try to describe everything in the Four Zoas because it's I don't know, it's hard to understand, and you can't really sum it up very easily. But this particular part, it has it has 9 nights to the Four Zoas, and the ninth night is sort of the apocalypse and the start of the new cycle, in like, to try to simplify it. And so it's describing humans and human culture as grapes and clusters of grapes, and then the great harvest that comes about at the end. So it's I'll just read it. I'll just read parts of it. I'll just start where the title starts. Tears of the grape, the death sweat of the cluster, the last sigh of the mild youth who listens to the luring sounds of Luva. The eternal man, darkened with sorrows in a wintry mantle, covered the hills. He said, O Tharmas, rise, and O Orthona. Then Tharmas and Orthona rose from the golden feast, satiated with mirth and joy. Orthona, limping from his fall, on Tharmas leaned. In his right hand his hammer. Tharmas held his shepherd's crook, beset with gold. Gold were the ornaments formed by sons of Urizen. Then Enion and Ahania and Vala and the wife of dark Orthona rose from the feast, in joy ascending to their golden looms. So what happens here? And right before that, that creep about the obscure places, shew their various limbs, naked in all their beauty, dancing round the wine presses. They dance around the dying, and they drink the howl and groan, and they drink the howl and groan. They catch the shrieks in cups of gold. They hand them to one another. They are the sports of love, and these the sweet delights of amorous play. So it's describing this huge, massive, apocalyptic harvest festival orgy, basically Dionysian wine orgy at the end, and then what happens after that is these four zoas, the four zoas, which were mentioned in that passage, Luva and Tharmas and Orthona and Urizen, finally come back into alignment and once again come back to the original positions and sort of integrate this. Well, later on in Jerusalem, it's Elbion. Elbion is like the original man. Like a sort of Adam Cadman kind of figure. Or Finn in Finnegan's Wake. And once his psyche is again integrated, the new cycle starts. Whereas before it's a total chaos where each of those four zoas are at war with each other, and there's war and misery on the earth. So that's what the title is about. And of course, yeah,
that was 42 minutes. Okay, so then here we go.
Yeah, thanks.
So
thanks,
that
Doug.
you can put some tea stains on page 127. What page do we put the tea stain on?
Well, the tea stain should be at the very end.
Is that the Wake, or is that Ulysses though? That's Ulysses, isn't it?
The wake ends with a tea stain. But
Okay.
yeah, there's probably a tea stain in Ulysses too.
Oh. Well, thank you so much. This was fun. This was this was great.
Yeah, thank you too for thank you for being interested.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what kind of conversation we have with a bunch of dudes on it.
The panel of experts.
The panel of experts, right?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that too, because I don't know. Like you know this from your own experience, like putting out a book, you really have no objectivity about it. You have no idea what it's like for other people. So it's always interesting to hear, like even critical comments on it. They're excellent because you find things that you've never considered. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to really buckle down. I've gotten so lazy with my reading. I can only read in the bathtub anymore. That's like I'm just too fidgety otherwise.
Really, it sounds like you read all the time.
I listen so much to. I mean, I do. I'm reading all the time, but like the idea of in my 20s, man, every night before bed, I would read from anywhere from, like 15 minutes to 2 hours every single day.
Right.
And that was just part of my day. But now it seems like that got repurposed into like wife time, and we watch TV. And so in the evenings before bed, I'll end up wasting my life on Twitter and Facebook.
I know, yeah.
But like walking the dog, I spend a lot of dumb time like doing dishes and that kind of stuff, and I can listen to books all day long doing that.
Yeah, that's good. My reading time is less these days too because I don't have the huge commute up to Tokyo as I used to have because of the coronavirus stuff. So yeah, I have less time to read these days too, but I am trying to get stuff read. I think I told you I'm on a huge Kerouac fix these days.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as I'm redoing this tunnel, I'm thinking about how if you had a hero's journey for like an American writer, it's almost like they do have to come out of the Midwest. Like this is, there is, because like I'm thinking about all these descriptions of the Wabash River and this and that, and the corn and the grasshoppers and all this. And it just seems like this is, one of the ways that your writer is born in the Midwest, and then they go to one of the coasts at some point in time, and that's like their hero's journey.
Yeah, well, Kerouac came from
think
Lowell.
Kerouac was somewhere in the Midwest too. Oh,
well, he's from Massachusetts, right? So, his family's originally from Quebec, yeah. So, but then he heads down to New York and then he heads out to San Francisco. But you're right, like On the Road is kind of based around Denver a lot. I guess that wouldn't count as a Midwest, but
no.
Yeah, so he does gotta have another experience just being from Massachusetts and being like basically French Canadian, his background.
I think I read somewhere that was someone was saying that he had two perspectives in him because he came from Quebec. Like he was able to encompass multiple viewpoints, and that was why he was so good.
Yeah, like
Which
apparently,
is an interesting theory.
yeah, I think that works. Like apparently he didn't even speak English until he was 6 years old or something, or maybe even later than that. Like I don't think he spoke a word of English before he went to school. Um, but the big book I got into of his, I don't know if you know of it. It's called Some of the Dharma, which is basically his notebooks that he wrote. When was it? Like from 53 to 55, 56 maybe, 53 to 56. It's his notebooks on Buddhism, and they just turn into like all kinds of things, poetry and like haiku and letters and all. It's just like it's a massive book, you know. It's really dense, and it's um has all kinds of like just like as a format of the book, like we were talking about that before. It's like each page has a different format to it. And he sends it away to Allen Ginsberg, and then he eventually gets it published. But it really gets into his Buddhism, his deep commitment at that time to Buddhism. Like he just immersed himself into Buddhism, and then it sets out his whole vision of what he saw his literature as being, which is kind of this Proust.
Interesting.
Say it again.
Oh, I said interesting because like the last Kerouac I did was Big Sur, and it feels like that book. I don't know if you've read that one.
Yeah.
He's really coming apart at that point in time, and
Yeah,
it might
he's
be
having DTs and everything else.
right. And I think that made him question everything that he believed up to that point.
Yeah, at that time his Buddhism was disintegrating as well. He eventually he gets back into his old original Catholicism, but no, I was just gonna say like his vision for his works though, like his Legend of Dulowitz, you know, which is people think of that as containing all of his novels or almost all of his novels, you know, and it's basically autobiographical. But in Some of the Dharma, he explains what he meant it as, at least at that point, is a sort of Proustian mega novel, all put together, all stitched together of all his 13 novels, but also including all of his poetry and then his prose writings, including this one, Some of the Dharma, and really it's this kind of Proustian epic of a writer who is a bodhisattva, you know, an American bodhisattva, like a new Buddha of writing for his time. And that's what he's exploring in all his writing. Like, it's this massive concept. And of course he's deeply inspired by the Wake too. Towards that time, like he wrote this whole published this whole book of poetry, kind of prose poetry called Old Angel Midnight, and it's his spontaneous bop prosody version of Finnegan's Wake, which just he just throws everything together all at once. That's a great book to read if you get a chance to find it somewhere.
The reason why I like him so much is because in a lot of his Awake, and you know, like his writings, he's in and around places that, you know, I've been in and around too. So like Desolation Angels, he is a fire lookout really not far from where we had our first zinc cabin.
Oh, really?
Where we
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was there.
in the Cascades, but then my dad lives not far from, I think it must be in the Dharma Bums, where they're doing a lot of hiking in and around. It's California. It's not far from San Francisco, but it's up in the Sierras. Like,
Yeah, it's by Mears Wood.
yeah, well, not far from Yosemite Park, basically.
Yeah.
But there's a town that they go to and stuff, and so, but my dad lives right around there too, and so like that was the comment about like when these guys are writing about the Midwest, they don't have any connection to that, but when you have a writer writing about the actual landscape that you inhabit, so like I was telling you about this Nez Perce War book where they're, it's like this is all the places that like where I grew up, and so to have history happening where you've been makes it all the more real or like meaningful for some reason.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's really meaningful too, because like I read On the Road in high school, which I guess a lot of people probably did too. But that book inspired me to just, as soon as I could, just get out on the road and start hitchhiking. And I went back and forth, Canada and the U.S. and down to Mexico and Central America. And that was all kind of inspired by Kerouac eventually. But
I thought I had read a lot more of him than I have. It's not very many, like 4.
Yeah, I'm just reading Satori in Paris right now, which is one of, I think, his second last little book. It's a tiny little book. It would, if you wanted to read it all in one stretch, it would just take you like a day or less than a day. But by this time, he's completely alcoholic. He's like 43 years old, and he's old for his age even, and he's just stumbling drunk through the streets of Paris and Bray and and trying to trace down his ancestry. But it's still good.
But now, were you saying that they made the book, like his vision of stitching together all his novels and all his poetry and everything?
No, that's just his vision of it, and I've only read about it in some of the Dharma. Like everybody knows about the legend of Dolowitz, and that he had this idea that all of his novels, like about 13 novels, are all intended to be one big legend, of this one guy, Jack Dolowitz, which is Kerouac, right? But in some of the Dharma, he explains that his vision of it goes way beyond just that. It includes all of his poetry and his prose writing, and his writing on the Dharma and Buddhist Dharma, and yeah.
The books don't cohere. I mean, they do. So it's like he removes reality one step and renames all the people in his life something different.
Yeah,
right?
he had to. Like his intention was to keep the original names, but his publishers wouldn't allow that. So
the names, even though do they? So like what is his muse? What is that guy's name? Why can't I think of his name?
Neil Cassidy or
Moriarty?
Dean Moriarty?
I was saying I was gonna say David Cassidy. I was like, what? No, but like these same characters, they don't have the same name in the different books, do they?
No, like he gets called, like Neil Cassidy gets called something different in Dharma Bums and his other, and in Subterraneans. I just finished that one. He's called something different too. Like On the Road, he's Dean Moriarty. And that book focuses on him, but then he wrote a book that I haven't read. I think it's called what is it? Visions of Neil? I don't know if it's called Visions of Neil. No, it's not Visions of.
Is it Visions of Cody?
Um, yeah, Cody, I think it is. Yeah, I think that's about him too. Um, yeah, Visions of Cody. So that's kind of like it's supposed to be a really good one. Like it's kind of like the more avant-garde version of On the Road. But
So here's another quick little. Did you know that Celine also became a fascist?
yeah, he's he's another one of those guys. So that yeah, I think that's
So,
why Gas is that's one of his inner texts, because
well, what do you make of that? And then how do you make that make sense with what happened with the alt-right? Is that what you're considering, or have you thought about that?
oh yeah, so that's a deep question. There's the same thing happened with Pound and a bunch of different people, like even Yeats and Eliot and Wyndham Lewis, that whole group of vorticists or English modernists all went heavily to the right. But there's all kinds of people, like even Carl Jung and Iliade and all of these people that kind of sync people are into all veer towards that direction. Even Joseph Campbell,
I think, yeah, he was
Uh,
accused of anti-Semitism,
yeah,
at
well,
least once.
you read his stuff, and he definitely doesn't like Judeo-Christianity, and especially the Judeo part of it. But yeah, that's a huge question, right? Like, why does that happen? Like in some ways, um, the right is a lot more receptive of just just a sort of spiritual or non-materialist view of things that the left, because it almost entirely followed Marx, kind of outlawed, as being bourgeois and as being reactionary, etc. Right, where the original manifestation of the left was a lot more inclusive of that kind of spiritual element to things. Yeah, I guess that's another subtext of my whole thing is just trying to reintroduce that, a kind of spiritual vision of the left. Um, but yeah, but to get that, you almost have to go through these kind of right wing lunatics and try to try to ransack their writings for the good nuggets as well. Like another guy
Well,
is.
do you have an?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, it sounds like we're in for quite a ride as far as this next book.
Of what?
The the,
Oh, the
the
Celine.
Celine. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah, like he might be uh just as Haiti as, like, or is that a word?
well, it is now.
Displeasure. Like, he also has displeasure with the world as much as Kohler.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's more interesting, the character in the book. Like he travels a lot. He's not like just this grumpy old professor in his
Yeah.
house. You know, like he goes all over the place. If that's actually, I don't know if the character in the novel is actually Celine, but it probably is. Um,
I think it is. I think, and like, were you saying that he influenced Kerouac?
yeah, he was a huge influence on Kerouac through Burroughs. So Burroughs turned Kerouac onto Celine. Um, but again, Kerouac is another one. Like last time we were talking, and you were saying that Ulysses is sort of the yes, and the tunnel is sort of the no. Kerouac is the yes as well. Like he emphasizes that point to his writing. But I think Celine is very much the no. But yeah,
Yeah.
another guy who went that way, who I haven't read but keeps getting recommended to me, is Knut Hamsun. Do you know that guy? He's a German writer.
No.
His big book, or I guess his most famous book, is called The Hunger. It's just called Hunger. And he's another one of these guys who is like he's on the edge. I think he hung out with Hermann Hesse, but he's he went that same kind of right wing. I don't know if he became a Nazi or like but he went that way as well. So I think all that stuff is fascinating. It's like exactly what you said is like trying to figure out what happened in those days, and then compare that to what's happening now or what might happen now, and maybe using it as trying to prevent what could happen now.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because it was less of a. I mean, I don't know. There was a part of the culture that definitely got sucked into that, but it's not like it was from an artistic standpoint, there wasn't. It doesn't seem like. But that's what's so weird about now too, though. It's like it's not like there are any poets that are the voices of the age so much.
Yeah,
Maybe
unless
in
you
the 60s.
include unless you include stuff like hip hop or something like that, or like, I don't know. I don't know what you.
Musicians definitely in the 60s it was music, but there were actual poets in the 60s too, that were well known and sold their work and stuff like that. But I was saying how reality is like such a drug, or it's just so encompassing, we don't have much room for the imagination. Maybe it is pundits that, like we don't have poetry anymore, we just have punditry, and they're the ones who embrace the fascism.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like in that introduction you read, yeah, I'm trying to make the point that there are those poets out there. Like I have a good friend in London who Luke Davis, who's an excellent, amazing poet, but he's like he he's not connected to any university or anything else. He's totally independent, and like he does his work typing just spontaneous poetry on the street, and poetry that he just types off of a manual typewriter and gives it to the person who requests it, and they read it and often break out into tears. Like he's just that good. Like he's got the process down. Like and then he writes poetry for himself, or is more I guess, I don't know if I should call it serious, but more personal poetry. But I think people like that exist. Not too many, but yeah, outside of the circles of the university and the entertainment industry, they do still exist.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we still have poet laureates, and they are good.
Yeah, even those people, like, I don't know, I don't want to put them down because I think there are good poets among them as well. But it's like yeah, the system tends to incorporate everything, right? So that whole institution of a poet laureate, it's almost, it's like taming the poet, like writers and writers in residence in local libraries and stuff. Like I don't want to put down any of their books. I'm sure they're good
what
books,
it
but it's
is? I would say the life of the mind used to be more robust, and so like people could make a living just writing short stories because people read short stories. There was less there was just more written culture, I think, that was consumed. There was just more commerce in that. Whereas now, like, there's so much television, and I don't watch very much television, but I just realized that when I glimpse how much television there really is and how much television normal people really watch, like, it's kind of shocking to me to just the amount of television that's out there. Like,
I don't.
There's so much money.
Yeah, so maybe that's where the poetry is, but I maybe to some extent, but if you like, television involves in movies and everything else, it involves such a huge production that you wonder how much of the poetic juice stays in there, you know? Like,
I'm just saying that they sucked all the
juice out.
The life out of the juice, yeah. And so they're still poets, but slice of pie that now goes to poetry or short stories, or everything is so much smaller, and so it's probably way harder to be like a poet these days.
Yeah, and I think poets have become, because of that, maybe that's a reason, or one of the reasons is that poets have become more timid, you know? Like, you get into the original roots of poetry, like the I don't know how to pronounce this, the old laves of Ireland, and it's like these guys have, they're like the bards. They have ultimate power, you know. If they write a satire about you, you're cursed. Your life is cursed. They you know, it's like Orpheus, you know. Orpheus made the rocks and trees cry, you know. You know, that's the power of poetry, to make the gods come alive again. And I just don't think many people take that seriously, you know. But unless...
Well, it's funny because I was thinking, so I subscribed to Harper's Magazine for years, and I've gotten kind of tired of it. It's like, I should just cancel this and resubscribe to Poetry Magazine. I used to get that, and it's just like a, you know, lots of different kinds of poems and lots of different poets, and
yeah, I'm sure there's great stuff out there.
Compared to what you're saying, yeah.
Like, even like a poem like Howl by Ginsberg, you know, and I know, other poets aren't much into Ginsberg maybe or whatever, but at least that was, and that's in the 50s, early 50s, right, or mid 50s, I guess. But at least that's an attempt to get back to that original howl, you know, like that original power that words have and should have. And I think that's an honest attempt to get back to that. But I don't know how much of that, like even Ginsberg, I don't know how far he went with that. Like, his background is also in Marxism. So he still has that kind of materialist worldview in the back of his mind, you know. Whereas earlier poets, it's like, I think they saw glimpses of the world of the gods, you know, like this sort of howling nature where spirits are everywhere, and like nature fully animated. But does that, hopefully, I don't know, maybe that comes back, you know. Maybe that's the next step. I was just talking to Wally about that the other day, and we're talking about the idea that maybe physics comes to the point where the symbol set to describe reality, so-called, or physical reality, the mathematics become fuzzier and fuzzier necessarily, because it's just realized that reality is more and more contradictory, you know, and what's fuzzier than actual language, actual conversational language, and then poetic language, right? And so if they get deeper and deeper into that, then maybe the poets become king again. You know, like they will be the ones who, they'll be the main physicists. They're the ones who are describing reality most accurately. Yeah, but I don't know. It's just it's just great to it's great to have people like you and other people who are willing to read books together. You know, read books together and explore books deeply together. That's a really important thing.
Well, it's so the difference, the interesting thing that I was thinking about is when it crosses the line. So like you've got the old tradition was all a poetic tradition, and so the story that has kind of been haunting me for a long time is this story, Eschenbach's Parsifal.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, Parsifal. Yeah. Yeah, go on, sorry.
But it's so funny because like I've only read it about 3/4 of it. I never finished it. But I knew that for some reason it was really like if Moby Dick was where I started, this Eschenbach is kind of where I've been stuck for a while, and there's kind of like this it does something really interesting with the union of opposites, you know, so it is right down the center of the valley, Parsifal, you know, but I didn't realize that Joseph Campbell basically, you know, in the early part of his career spent a lot of time, you know, with the Grail, and so he's got all this writing on that poem and how just ahead of its time it was. He really holds that in such a high regard. But I mean, it's a poetic form is the other interesting thing. And so I think in terms of translation, if people when they translate it into English with the rhymed couplet, I think it becomes really tedious. So that whole thing is really interesting too. But I was making a larger point. I'm sorry. So the earlier tradition, it felt like, you know, the great writing all was definitely poetry.
Yeah.
And then at some point, like you get to Cervantes, and he, you know, or Shakespeare is a poetic form. But you're getting into like longer narrative forms that aren't necessarily poetry. And then the Joyce, the Ulysses, I wouldn't necessarily say is poetry, but it's right there on that line, right? And so the tunnel is the same way, where you could tell that each line was crafted and shaped, and it feels like poetry a lot of the time, but it probably,
yeah, it does.
I wouldn't say that it's poetry, but boy, it's so close. But then Finnegan's Wake is, I don't know how else you could, you know, take it. It just, when I look at that, it's like, ugh. This is not something that you can just lightly tread into. Or maybe
yeah,
you
it's
can.
just a massive prose poem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was going to talk about the whole Arthurian thing too. I've got a bunch of books lined up on my shelf that I want to get into. Like we don't like, I wouldn't have to start like this, but like Chrétien de Troyes, I guess.
Yeah.
The Arthurian romances, which comes before Eschenbach. Like I think Chrétien is like coming out of the troubadour tradition. And then I think Eschenbach is the sort of German equivalent, these sort of, I don't know how to pronounce this, the mini singers. It's sort of the German counterpart of the troubadours. And then so he continues on. And then quite a while later, there's Sir Thomas Malory, with Le Mort d'Arthur, and then Tennyson. Tennyson. You have the Idols of the King. It would be awesome just to read all of those, go through all of that stuff, and get a sense of the whole sort of Arthurian tradition in literature. And
well, because I had that class, I have read. So I read. We did Chrétien. We did that, and he's really good. But then the Malory comes out of a different tradition, and so it has a different paradigm. It seems like I guess the reason why Joseph Campbell made such a fuss about Parzival is because it's like a secular mythology. It doesn't have, whereas like the Malory tradition is more of a sacred, like it comes out of this, I guess, Cistern tradition, and so it has that kind of religious inflection in it. But yeah, if you ever stumble across that Joseph Campbell essay about, I think it's just about the Holy Grail. It's fabulous. It's really good.
Well, for sure, I'd be completely deeply interested in doing Percival if you wanted to dive into that someday.
Yeah, I definitely do. Especially, well, I feel like Joseph Campbell did all this heavy lifting already, though, where like he broke it apart symbolically and mythologically and stuff. I mean, I'm sure we'd find other things or things that were relevant to now, but
yeah, my copy is only 430 pages. That's pretty light reading for our club.
What what translation do you have? Is it the
Helen M. Mustard and Charles E. Passage?
Does it rhyme?
No, it's all prose.
Yeah.
Is it yours? Yours is.
Oh yeah.
Yours is not prose.
No, I don't have a rhyming one. It is.
Okay.
Mine is prose, but I've come across one that it had couplets or something, and it seemed kind of trite, maybe. But then I don't know. I've read some translation where they tried. So like when you try to keep the rhyme, it seems like you end up getting really creative.
Yeah, sometimes that convolutes things.
Right, and you end up sacrificing some of the substance for the structure.
Yeah, it's probably like if you were able to read it in the German, I guess it would be. The rhyme there would tell a different story,
Right.
But yeah, with an English translation, you probably lose a lot of it. But yeah, that'd be an interesting book to get into.
Yeah, well, we'll put it on the list.
It is on the list.
It's on the list. It's on the list. All right. Well.
Yeah, I should get going.
Probably should. Yeah. All right. Well, seems like there's a million different emails out there, but everything is chugging along, and so we'll just we'll keep on. You won't have any problem reading the Celine as far as you. I mean, it won't be December until we do that. Probably.
No, I'm actually going to read it with a couple of friends here too. It just sort of worked out like that. So I don't know. We'll probably.
They want to join us?
I don't know. I could ask them. I'm not sure if they'd want to come on or whatever, but I could ask. Yeah, we'll probably be starting pretty soon, I guess. So Yeah, I'd
So
probably be.
thanks for the for November. Thanksgiving kind of makes things strange for me
Mm-hmm.
because um, since I work in food service,
It's a
the
busy time.
weekend before, like yeah, and so it would have to be like the second week of November if we were going to do it before Thanksgiving, or we'd have to probably go after.
Yeah, I don't know if I can finish by the second week. Um,
Yeah, so December is totally fine with
I
me.
haven't started it
The
yet.
first week of December.
I haven't started it yet. I don't know how engrossing it is. So, like, if I start with these guys right away, might be possible to finish it by then. Um, it looks like it looks easier to read than the tunnel.
I don't know. I don't know if it is or not. I thought it was so much smaller, but it's not a small book.
It's not a small book, but it's not
It's not giant either.
and it's not sucking you into somebody's psyche in the same way as a tunnel. I don't think, Like some of the prose in the tunnel is difficult. Um, like
I'm noticing there are parts that I am kind of drifting on a little bit. So when he's talking about Herschel Greenspan, I don't know what his real
oh
name is. He calls him Greenspan,
yeah.
but he's in Germany and he's in this apartment and he conflates the whole experience he has with this neighbor and Kristallnacht and
Yeah.
and he's going on and on about whether or not there's a third person in the room to turn off the light or something, and it seems like it's not super engrossing. It's like what is going on here? But he's conflating all these different things, and like maybe he's the third person, but it all is tied together with this kind of conspiracy theory about what the true intention of Greenspan was.
Yeah. Yeah. How that's connected to Kristallnacht is, yeah, I'm not sure. Like his voyeuristic thing about his neighbor's window. Like it's that whole section is
Right.
about looking out windows and smashing windows. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to hear some criticism about that. Like what what's going on there? Like what um in a way I kind of it almost seems like he doesn't go deeper, like the stuff that's happening is actually happening, and the depth comes in his own weird analysis and his own subconscious. But I think the actual events happen in the way he narrates them. But I don't know.
Yeah. I, I yeah. Things are harder to pin down the second time. So like my experience was after the first time, like I didn't read it close enough and I missed details. But like
Mm.
at the beginning, like he is definitely sending his sons away to college.
Is he?
Like
Yeah.
it's just yeah, they're definitely out of the house. And he even says that his sons go to unremarkable colleges,
Yeah,
which is
yeah. I remember that part. Yeah, but then he's also that that Leopold Bloom section where he's at home by himself fixing his breakfast and stuff. He talks about his wife and kids leaving.
right. And so it's hard to know when these things are really happening. Like you're saying, yeah, I think these really did happen. But then also, just his age is definitely, there's no way he could be a 15-year-old graduated from high school in Germany taking Magus Tabor's class, right? The first time. Could that be real?
But would he have to be 15 at that time? Like, couldn't he? Like I said, like if he was, so Kristallnacht is.
He was 17. You're saying?
Well,
1938.
Well, Kristallnacht, maybe he was 20 even. You know, like he's 20, and then he'd still 67. He'd be 50. And then, like there is one point in the book which says it is 67. You know.
It does, and I picked up on that.
Well, the copy of my book just arrived right at the moment. Like the actual copy.
You mean
delivered to my door.
What are you talking about?
What?
The tunnel just arrived, or the Celine?
Oh no, my book, the Death Sweat of the Cluster just arrived.
Oh.
Just my I just got it delivered right at this moment when we're talking. Looks great. But
and this is the non-proof, your real.
The non-proof, copy. Yeah, the real copy, which I haven't seen yet, and it looks way better. The print is clear. It's not all pixelated like the proof copy is. That looks great. Yeah. So
on the printing page, the last page, what does it say?
Oh yeah, good question. I want to check that too. Printed in Japan. So I ordered a bunch of author copies, but it.
Right.
Yeah, the date, it doesn't give a date. It doesn't give a date. It just says printed in Japan.
In the U.S., this copy says made in the USA, Middleton, Delaware, September 1st, 2020.
Yeah, Alan said he was going to clear up the images, and he really has. Like they're even better in this than the proof. Yeah, it looks great. Anyways, yeah. So we're on the tunnel. So okay, so he's 50. He's 50 and 67 or 68. So that kind of works with his narrative, right? Like he's saying he's around 50 or so.
That definitely works, but one of the essays was, I'll have to look at it again, but it seemed like he said a couple things that were difficult to pin down, having to do with when his mother was taken to the insane asylum.
And that's yeah.
And then also when like how old he was at that time. And then that, I don't know that I'm going to be able to explain it to you, but it just.
Yeah, it does seem he was younger when he sent his mom away, yeah?
Well, I think that's the book states, he states that he was 15 when his mother was sent away.
So yeah, that would.
But
yeah,
and that's the other thing. I think his mother was sent away in 1938, maybe.
He really? His mom?
So like.
Yeah, that's curious. That's so weird.
I could be making. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I like you said. Were you the one who said that it doesn't seem to be much criticism written about it to really explore all that stuff? Like I think you
I
said that
said
last
that,
time.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
I did. I said that because based on the internet, but I don't know if the internet is a good way to figure out like the type of academic journals or not. They don't necessarily translate to the kind of stuff you find on the internet necessarily, but
But there's no book or something like that, a skeleton's key of the tunnel or something like that. Like
well, yeah. I mean, my impression is that it came out and people thought it was something and they dug into it, but then you know they moved on, you know.
oh yeah, yeah, I see.
And I don't necessarily think that it's done forever, because it does potentially explain our moment really, really well right now.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see if people do come to it too. The way you broke down the penance to explain how it just starts with pettiness, how all
Yeah,
this
yeah,
resentment grows and grows.
that's excellent. Like that. Oh, I was watching a documentary called The Architecture of Doom. Have you ever seen that? I think it came out in 1989. And I remember watching it then as well, and it really kind of floored me then. But I'm just watching it again on YouTube, and it's all about Nazi aesthetics, um, and how kind of their politics, in a way, grew from their aesthetic vision of things, this neoclassicist aesthetics that they had. There's some emphasis on purity of art, and getting rid of decadent art, and then the same thing would apply to their racial theories and their society, in their views on society in general. Um, but what was I going to say? So yeah. So in the tunnel, Kohler is coming up with all his like those pennants and those banners and all the badges of the Party for Disappointed People, but Hitler did the exact same thing. He was coming up. He created all these sketches for what the banners should look like and what the uniforms should look like and everything else. He's like, I didn't realize that part about the tunnel, that it's so accurate in that way too. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't joking. Maybe you to become the world's foremost tunnel scholar.
Yeah, we could both do it. We could come up. We could be the do the Campbell and Robinson version of Skeleton's Key for the tunnel.
Well, since yeah, I probably should interview some of these guys who did their symposium thing, just because I've got all that in my brain right now.
Yeah, I was excited when you said that his daughter retweeted the talk we had. But did
Yeah, I wish she had 1 million followers.
yeah,
Got
yeah.
liked a few times, so we got some probably people interested in listening.
You didn't try to contact her further, or you didn't hear any more from her? She'd be interesting just to see.
No.
You could send her a follow-up and just ask her how she liked it or something. I guess that's hard to do on Twitter.
No, you could. Yeah, I think you could send someone a direct message sometimes. Some people don't let you do that, but yeah.
Cool. Okay. Should we cut off? I
Yeah.
should go and eat my lunch, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, thanks. The book's good. I hope it sells 1 million copies. And I'll be in touch.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing the panel discussion. Don't hold back. You guys can rip me another one if that needs to happen.
Well, I'm so I'm just really curious. I know that Zach thinks he's going to fly through it. And so he wanted an expedited timeline. I just don't know, you know. It sounds like Bill's ready to go whenever we are. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it should be a good talk.
how fast are you able to read it? Like, is it?
Not very fast.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not. And yeah, so that's what's interesting. But it might be. I don't know.
I think
Alan had a similar experience where the beginning is trickier than the deeper you get into it.
Yeah, like the tunnel.
Yeah.
But he mentioned that even Jason thought it was dense, which is that's interesting to me because I Jason's thought is pretty dense too, I think, but
well, I think Jason used to read some of the most dense stuff.
Yeah. So I'm surprised he said that. But other people said that they flew through it. Like Wally, who's not into reading that much, he doesn't do much reading actually. He was able to get right into it and go quickly. So it's just another thing I'm interested about is how it reads, how quickly it reads or not.
I think I'm a defective unit at this point, though. I don't know that I could say I'm good yardstick for.
I wouldn't call yourself that. You've gotten through all these other crazy books.
All right.
Yeah. So take care. Have a great experience in the mountains. I'd love to be out there.
Yeah. I might go sit out in the hot tub right now before bed.
Excellent. Okay. All right. See you again then, Doug.
Okay. You take care.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.